my best friends. I'm Tabby.
And I'm Caitlin, and today we will be discussing The Finish Line, the third and final book in the Ravenhood trilogy by Kate Stewart, our queen.
Yes, our queen. However, we did really condense the synopsis on this one, just because there wasn't a lot that happened that was worth noting. So it's a pretty short one. If you want to read the book, read the book. If not, then this should suffice.
Yeah, this is more of a summary rather than a synopsis.
It's not a synopsis. If you really want to go to fucking whatever it's called, Spark Notes.
Oh, yes. Do they still do Spark Notes?
I don't actually know. I'm sure they do for old books.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure
maybe not for this.
Anyways,
but we start off, Tobias is gone to be with Cecilia and the new life she's made for herself in BFE. And this book is mostly about the struggles that they face as Cecilia tries to forgive Tobias for all the heartbreak he's caused her in the past. So there's a lot of flashbacks to Tobias's past from the childhood where he had to take care of Dom, and also flashbacks to when he was in France for his school as a young man and began to form the Ravenhood. And during these flashbacks, we learn about Tobias working with a man named Antoine. So Antoine basically helped Tobias gain the skills and connections to form the Ravenhood, but later turned into one of the biggest threats and enemies because he was basically a little bitch and kind of kept Tobias on the hook even after he came back to America. He was still kind of keeping Antoine on the back burner, basically.
Yeah, because the thing is with Antoine is Tobias never really necessarily wanted to work with him. It's just that Tobias had nothing to start with. And so he was well, I need someone to help me get the resources that I need, basically. But anyway, a lot happens as far as flashbacks and will they, won't they with Cecilia and Tobias,
so
even
dumb.
though we knew they would get together, but there was a whole lot of back and forth.
Drag him along the whole book.
Yeah, super annoying, in my opinion. As the book ends, Cecilia kind of pulls a little sneaky one on Tobias for once. So she has not stopped being a badass bitch, and she develops this whole elaborate plan with the help of all the Triple Falls Ravens to take down Antoine without Tobias knowing, because she knew that Tobias was hiding something. She literally just called Sean and was what the fuck is going on?
He's going fucking crazy.
Yeah. So she was okay, I'll take care of my man. And so she executes this plan perfectly. Tobias is oh my God, this woman is the love of my life. She's amazing. She's a queen. And so they continue in their work together in the Ravenhood with Cecilia, leading a lot of the decisions and stuff. They work for another 7 years with the Ravenhood, and they take down their 5 most prolific targets that they've been working towards all these years. And so then they feel they can finally retire, and the two of them get to have their life of peace in St. John de Luz, and they have their little happily ever after. And it's very sweet.
It was really cute.
It is.
After dealing with fucking them having the worst,
literally trying to
sexual tension, even at they've already gotten together. I don't know. It was wild.
Yeah, and this is 10 years of their life that they wasted wanting to be together, but not being together, basically. At this point. And
it was exhausting.
Well, I guess not 10 years, but
it was
6.
It was 7 or 8 years of their life. So
she was gone. Another 8 months go by.
She was gone for 8 months, and then we get another fucking 8 months of them.
Yeah, so if you round up,
whatever,
it's 10 years ish.
A decade.
We'll call it 10.
It's more time than they should have spent on.
Especially because there were so many times that they were 2 seconds away from fucking, but then someone would knock on the door and they're well, we can't let that happen again. Well, mostly Cecilia. But anyway, what are your kind of overall ratings for this book?
So I love this series, and I have a wild respect for Kate Stewart. However, this book just didn't do it for me. And honestly, after everything that happened in Exodus, it was just kind of a letdown for me. So I gave it an 8. I gave it an 8.5 out of 10 because there were still some parts of the book that I loved, and I thought they were great. I thought they were well written, and mostly that was like the flashbacks from Tobias's point of view, and then the very last chapter of the book were like my favorite, like the epilogues. But like the back and forth between Cecilia and Tobias, like grated on me. I thought it was terrible.
Same. And so I actually like, I would rate it an 8 out of 10 for really similar reasons.
Yeah.
And because like I felt like the middle of the book for me, I was doing a lot of skimming up until like maybe there was like a quarter of the book left. And then I was finally like, okay, I'm back into this. I love the characters. I love the closure that we get. Sure. And also I love all the insight into Tobias and the Ravenhood that we would not have otherwise had. So,
well, and so
I like it, but
the thing with this book too, and like I was going to talk about it later, but I think it fits in really nicely here. So Kate Stewart initially had written this book as just like a little bonus short story as like an extra to Exodus. So like in Exodus, they ride off into the sunset together after like all this sad stuff with Dom, and like we get that closure. And so I kind of wish she had just kept it as a short story and basically like broke it down into a few chapters where we do get that backstory behind like Tobias's flashbacks. I love knowing like how the Ravenhood was formed. I thought that was awesome. We got to see Dom and Sean and Tobias like as like young children, and that was great. And I love that. And then, you know, getting to see how Cecilia and Tobias like ended up together 7 years later and how they started a family and got married. And then like the very last chapter with Sean and his son and like him telling him about the Ravenhood. I thought that was so beautiful, and it gave me like goosebumps. And like if she had just left it as that, it would have been awesome. And I really just don't think we needed that back and forth between Tobias and Cecilia.
I 100% agree, because the thing about it is, yes, I do understand that realistically, Cecilia would be guarded after everything that she went through. But my issue that I'm taking with it is that Cecilia, like, had all of these reasons that she didn't trust Tobias and stuff, but she loved him in spite of it. And she literally went back in the second book. She went to Triple Falls to, like, beg him to take her back. And I get, like, yes, he did, like, reject her at that point. But
he was scared.
He was scared. I mean, she was scared. It was all like...
It had been 6 years.
Yeah, exactly. And so my thing is, I am really kind of surprised that she doesn't readily accept his apology and like excuses. And I'm not saying that would necessarily be the healthiest
thing. It's not the best thing.
But it surprises me about her character that that's not how she responded to him coming back for her. I'm surprised that she like was so...
Well, because if you think back to like when she had her fight with Sean, and maybe it's like a character development for her, I don't know. Because like when she had that giant fight with Sean in the kitchen, and he basically was like, "You think I'm fucking crazy?" And she was like, "You know, I just don't agree with some of this stuff," and like walked away. When he was like, "No, you know, I'm sorry," she went back to him immediately. And like the way Dom treated her, she went back to him immediately.
Yeah,
and so it would have been very like in character of her to do so. And so I was just shocked when she like kind of put him through the ringer.
Same. And like, honestly, she probably should have. And I do think that's realistic for someone to react that way. It just surprised me that she did as a character.
Which I think showed growth as a person, I guess.
That's true. That is true. So maybe that's like what Kate Stewart was trying to convey. But it is also just like funny how it leads to like this basically mental breakdown in Tobias. Like he is like
he's not doing well.
Yeah, I literally like cannot live without this woman, and I've fucked it up. And he was like, I cannot go on without her. And he had like freaking mental breakdowns in her kitchen. Like
he's drinking a lot.
Yeah, trying to cook, extremely drunk, and he just made a disaster of everything and poured out a bunch of drunk confessions that he couldn't even remember the next morning. Like he was not okay. He literally went for like a run, because he goes for a run when he's angry. He went for a run. He was like so drunk. He went for a run in jeans, no shirt, and an apron because he had been cooking, and he was like, I have to get out of here. I have to go for a run. So he just took off.
Yeah, it was just like very...
Get in the car.
it was almost like uncomfortable to read in some of those chapters because I'm just like, what has happened to you? Like, what has this lady done to you? Like, he is like the fucking king of the Ravenhood. Like, he is taking down like the government and like terrorist organizations, and like he is getting sloppy drunk in a kitchen, like crying on the floor.
Cecilia's his Helen of Troy.
My gosh.
Like,
which is one of my favorite stories.
Oh, yeah. She just turned his world on its head and he was like, fuck.
Let's talk about Cecilia, actually. I feel like her character took 5 steps back in the first, like, 80% of that book for me. Like, she was, I don't know, their relationship has always been, like, toxic, I guess, but her character was really pissing me off. And like, I always gave her the benefit of the doubt in the first 2 books, as I'm like, yeah, girl, like, I get it. Like, I'd probably act the same if I were in your shoes. And maybe I would too if I was in that situation. But I just felt like she was kind of a bitch in the 3rd book. And like, she did have her like absolute badass moment, like in the last 10% when she does like go up against Antoine and she has the whole Ravenhood like backing her up. But like, I don't know, like the back and forth was a lot.
No, I 100% agree. And again, like, I can understand why she would react that way, but it just does not feel like our Cecilia. Like, not my Cecilia.
And that's why she should have left as a short story.
Yeah, because like, okay, you can say that like Cecilia had like this growth or whatever, but like, hey, we have come to know and love our girl for who she is. And so for you to like switch things up at the end,
I would have easily accepted that she just took him back.
Yeah, I don't like it. She would have absolutely have been like immediately, yes. And that's what I was led to believe was going to happen at the end of Exodus.
Yeah.
Because she just like drove him to her house and she was like, we're going home. And I was
like, she was like, yeah, okay. I'm like, sense. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Let's end it there.
Anyways.
Did love like her redevelopment of her relationship with Sean. Like, they did have a very beautiful moment together at the end of the book and like kind of got some closure. And like, he did still tell her, you know, like, I'll always love you. You're the first girl I ever loved. And she's like, yeah, you're the first guy I ever loved, but we're in 2 different spots in our life. And I really do feel like it's like this unrequited love, like is star-crossed lovers type vibe, where like if anything had been different, they would have ended up together in some life.
Yes.
And that always is going to make me a little sad, and it's always going to break my heart a little bit for them because they will always love each other.
Yes.
It just wasn't meant to be in that lifetime.
And I think that's like an interesting thing to write into a story, because in our culture and society, like, people tend to be monogamous. They tend to be extremely jealous if anyone like harbors feelings for like an ex-love. But I think it's so important to like recognize that there is nothing wrong with you if you still hold love for someone in your heart.
That's like that. Healthy.
That's healthy, because like, imagine like you're widowed. Like,
right.
Of course you're still going to love your spouse that's passed away. Like, it's no different than just being like separated from someone because they didn't break up because they stopped loving each other. They broke up because of circumstances. And so like, of course you're still going to love that person in some way for the rest of your life.
Just like she'll love Dom for the rest of her life. Like she made her whole house something that Dom would enjoy. Like, her whole home was dedicated to their safe space during those rainy days. And I thought that was such a beautiful way to celebrate him. And I don't know.
Like, hold his memory.
I cried a little bit when
because yes, you absolutely can love people multiple ways, and you can love someone in multiple different ways at different points in your life. And that's a great example of what Cecilia and Sean are experiencing. And I think that like Tessa in the second book definitely had a moment of jealousy with Cecilia because
which I get it. Looking back on it, I get it.
Oh, that's totally valid. And well, I do wish that she hadn't like immediately acted like Cecilia
she didn't do it well, but I understand where she was coming from.
I do too. And so like, I think she was able to like finally reconcile in her mind that like, yes, they do still love each other, but like they recognize that they will not be together. Like they do not belong together in the way that Sean and Tessa and Cecilia and Tobias do.
Which kills me a lot inside. And it's
I know.
okay. And it's supposed to, because it probably kills them a little bit inside too, that they never had their moment, but they also get it. I don't know. It's just really sad.
Yeah. So like, don't ever let anyone tell you that there's something wrong with you.
It's okay to feel things.
Someone. Yes. Like emotions are human. Valid. You're normal if you feel that way. That's normal and that's healthy.
It's just so sad. It's just a kind of a stab in the gut, just going from, because it's such a difference going from book 1 to book 3. And you're just like, man, how did we get here?
It was a wild ride.
It's a wild ride from start to finish.
Truly. Like, and when I started this series, I had not the slightest clue where we were going. And so I just think that in itself makes me speak very highly of Kate Stewart.
Yeah, it left me guessing.
She wrote something so fresh and
it's so special.
Yes. So special is the perfect word to describe it. Like, I don't think I'll ever read another series that is like this one. And I think that's really cool. And that's something that I think sets her apart as an author, and
that's why I'll keep rereading this book.
Oh yeah. And it has such great reread value, which we've talked about before, but
maybe not the third one, but the first 2, definitely. You can definitely stop at the second one and be fine.
Yeah. I mean, the third one was just to like,
the third one just gives you closure in your heart though.
Yes. And I do have that now. And if I were to ever, read this series again in the future, I probably would just read the first 2, and that's okay. I know what happens in the third one and I love the closure that she's given us, but it was just a bit long.
Well, and as somebody who, so like whenever I read like rom-coms, for example, or something where like there is always some dramatic thing that breaks apart the main male character and the main female character in the last like 10% of the book. Because, there's always something that breaks them apart. And I always wish at the end of the book that I just got a little more backstory about what their life was like together. That's kind of what this was. It was just taken a little too far, which is why I said, I just want an extra 5 chapters.
It was just a little too far because it was a little too repetitive.
Yes.
It was a whole like song and dance.
It gave me what I needed, just a little bit too much of it.
Exactly. Just took too long to do it,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think we're both in agreement there.
So Tobias, really the only other main character in this book. It's really just the Tobias and Cecilia show. Sean was kind of like a background character. Same with Tyler. But they played a very important role in the book. Loved his devotion to Cecilia, but my man was off his fucking rocker.
Yeah, he was not doing well.
God, he was so jealous and like it was really funny. He had some really funny moments. Like he was hilarious and I laughed a couple times, but like other than that, I was like concerned.
Yeah, because the thing is, it was funny, but like you can assume that Tobias himself, the character, is being serious. So like for that reason, it's sad. Not that funny. His really jealousy was like off-putting because Cecilia like blew kisses to Tyler's drone, not even Tyler himself. She blew kisses at the drone, and Cecilia and Tyler have literally the most platonic relationship.
Yeah, it's
they're like brother
friendship.
And sister. They are literally, and they like react to each other and have a relationship that is very similar to siblings.
I love it.
And so for Tobias to get jealous when she blew him kisses.
Tyler, who was in love with his aunt, like hard in love with his aunt.
I literally know. So I was just like, that's too far. That is too fucking far.
Come on, man. It's Tyler.
Like, can you imagine like your significant other getting mad at you for like hugging your cousin or some shit, because this is like the same line.
Yeah, like they're family.
Yeah. So that was just like,
Yeah. Well, and it was so wild to me that he got jealous over Tyler, but not over Sean.
Right.
Like, he had such a respect for like Sean and Cecilia's relationship. And I think partly it was because of like how Dom played into it and he would never think poorly of his own brother.
Yeah.
But it's just like, come on, man. Like she didn't sleep with Tyler.
I know. That is kind of funny that he
it was just wild to me.
But I also do think maybe because I also did take it as when she was like blowing the kisses at Tyler or whatever, I did kind of take it as he was just being playful whenever he was like, you don't give your kisses away. I did kind of take it as that. Sure. And so maybe like he's not weird about her and Sean's relationship because like he knows like, okay, this is actually serious. Like, right. I can't like actually like even joke about that because like this is actually like a big deal to her and like I respect that. So like potentially I think it has a big lot to do with like how it all played out and like the deceit that went on and like the mistrust. I know, among all of them, they all kind of fucked it up, to be honest. They were all
he probably won't touch that with like a 10-foot pole. I did love that we finally got that closure though at the end with Tobias because the whole book he was just blaming himself for Dom's death and like he wanted to die and like he was not in a good spot and like when they finally made it to France and like they were able to move into his father's family home and they met at the finish line, like he had a very beautiful moment on the beach where he got to talk to Dom and kind of like just share all the feelings that he had about what's happened in the past 8 years. And it was such a good way to end the story.
If Cecilia is currently the most important person in his life, then Dom is
close second, if not tied for first.
Yeah, I would say tied for first. I mean, it's his baby brother. Like he, from a young age, at the age of 11, he took on kind of like a guardianship role for his baby brother. And so he has never felt more protective over a single person than he has Dom. And so like for him to be blaming himself for Dom's death for 6 years, like that has to have taken a freaking toll on this man's mental health. And so just to see him finally like let that go and take that off his shoulders because it was not his fault. Dom made some choices that led ultimately to him getting injured and dying, and that fucking sucks. But like you can't blame yourself.
He made that choice. He didn't want to live if Cecilia was not in his life, and like
I know, which kills
me bad
deeply. Because, like, man, he would have, if he just would have lived,
he would have found somebody.
He would have moved on, but like that pain was just too great for him at that moment. He basically just ultimately took his own life. Like he knew he was not going to survive if he made that choice. And so that's what hurts the most is because it's like it would have gotten better, like that pain would have gotten better, but he didn't let it.
In that moment, like it was too much. It was sad, but it was his choice, not Tobias's.
I know. And so it was nice to have that lifted off his shoulders. And same with like the guilt that he felt with Sean and their relationship being broken for so long.
Sean forgave him and
and Tobias forgave Sean too because they both had betrayed each other at some point. And they were essentially brothers as well. Sean was another baby brother to him. So for that to also be reconciled was so powerful. And I think like that's the closest thing Tobias would experience to closure with Dom as well. So that was like really, really a big deal for him.
That last 10% of the book made me so emotional.
I know. And it made it worth like getting through the middle part that I didn't like.
Because you're like, we got to the finish line as readers as well.
Mm-hmm. And man, was it tough.
It was tough. Let's talk Kate, we love you so much. You're a goddess. Let's talk about some of the stuff we liked about the book, because there was a lot that happened that was very good. That was absolutely so good in this book. I think the first and biggest one was just the very last chapter with Sean and his son. It was just chef's kiss, the best fucking thing I've ever read in my life. Because first of all, we get to see how happy Sean is with Tessa. And I think that is very important because everyone fucking hates her guts because she was so mean to Cecilia. But like to see the love that he has for that lady and his children that he's had with her, like, it's like, damn, okay. Like, yeah, she was probably really worried about it. And I get it, Tessa.
Yeah.
I do. Like just that last interaction with Sean, because his kid knows he's doing something and like he wants to be a part of it. And so when he kind of reflects what he had asked to Cecilia that night, when she asked if she could know more about what he's up to, and he said, can you keep a secret? And he turns around and goes, well, I guess what I'm asking is, can you keep a secret to his son? Like it gave me goosebumps. Like
Me too.
like it made that whole book worth reading, just to like see that last interaction, to see how the legacy of the Ravenhood was being carried on.
It was the perfect circle. And like the fact that his son is named Dominic too, like after Dom, it just like, you know, that this is also like so cathartic to Sean, like sharing this with his son, who has been named after his best friend.
Who has the characteristics of Sean.
Yes, exactly. And so like it's got to feel so good to him to share this part of his life now with his son. Like it's finally gotten to the point where he can. And so that's got to be like such a big like thing for him.
Well, and not only that, but I just love that Kate Stewart started with Sean. Sean was like the first dude that we met, and it ended with Sean. And so it really gave us closure as readers too, to see that he's doing well, because that was our first love.
Yeah.
Like that was like the character we all fell in love with before anybody else. Yeah. And so I was so glad that she ended with Sean.
Because when you start book one, you're like, oh, this is it. This is like, our
Sean's
man.
Great.
And it's like, nope, you do not know who the love interest is, because then Dom's introduced and you're like, wait.
What's going on here? It's both of them. And
then
like, Tobias
book two just shakes you up and
spits you out.
Yeah. The roller coaster was phenomenal, Kate.
I cried. I cried at the very end when he asked that of his son. And I think that was great because once again, you have evoked deep emotions for me. And that's all I ask as a reader is that the author evokes emotions.
She's so good at it. She's a master.
So good.
I also just like, I love that Cecilia and Tobias finally get their freaking happily ever after.
Yes.
Not only is it like so great for us just because like we want them to be together, but it's what Tobias talked about in book two when he was falling in love with Cecilia. He told her like he had this dream, like this was his finish line, this is what he was working toward. And so that just makes it even better, is the fact that they actually like made it to that point. Not like they didn't get killed in their like life risking efforts in the Ravenhood. Like they fought their way through, they got their goals accomplished, and they like made it out. And so that's freaking powerful.
Not only that, but like Tobias discloses that, you know, his father did have, I think it was it bipolar? No, I can't remember.
I think schizophrenia.
Yeah. So his father had a mental illness. And so a big reason why he so hesitated to commit to anybody was because he was so scared that it was going to pass on to him and he'd pass it on to his children. And so like the whole ending where he waited the full amount of time to make sure like it hadn't passed on to him before he committed to Cecilia and they had children. I thought that was really beautiful as well. And like, I know it was such a big deal to him too, because he just had so much anxiety around like him ending up like his father.
Because he did also have other mental health issues.
Yeah.
So he
was like, depressed. He had OCD.
Yeah, OCD and anxiety. And he was like, fucking great. Like, I'm going to slowly deteriorate and lose my mind, which I also think it's important to talk about this as well, because being diagnosed with schizophrenia is not
it's not the end of the world.
It's not like fortunately, there have been so many, like, I always feel like I have to get on my soapbox because
No, do it. Absolutely. It's important. Mental health is so important.
mental health is so important, but there have been so many advancements in the treatment of mental illnesses in general, including schizophrenia. And with treatment and cognitive behavioral therapy, it is a manageable disorder. It is not curable, but the symptoms can be managed so that you live a life, a full life, a happy life with your loved ones. And it is not a death sentence. I think people are so like horrified by the thought that they could have that happen to them. And while I'm not like, obviously it would be so scary.
I would not wish that on anybody.
No,
but
it's the same as getting any other life-altering diagnosis.
Sure.
It's horrifying, it's scary, it makes you question everything.
It's the unknown.
Exactly. But I don't like want that to like this message of this book to be like misconstrued as like,
Sure.
oh yeah, if he had gotten schizophrenia, he could not have lived with Cecilia and been happy. Like, you know, because
that is a negative of how she wrote that for sure.
Yeah. But at the same time, it was like from Tobias's perspective, and like those were his like emotions coming through, and like, you know, how he was seeing it. He was seeing it at the end of his personal world, which I completely get. But I think it's like important just to kind of like mention that since we're, you know, on the topic because it's in the book. But yeah, like, oh, let me see what this YouTube channel is. Hold on one moment, because there's this lady who is amazing and so brave and so awesome. And she has schizophrenia.
And it really can be scary getting that diagnosis. And like, there are definitely communities and there's help, you know, to kind of work through it, that initial, you know, fear of having it. And like Caitlin said, it's really not, you know, the end of the world, even though it seems like it at the time. There's just so many things to help with it.
Yeah, and absolutely, if anyone were to receive that diagnosis, absolutely,
I would be scared.
Grieve and take your time and grieve the whole process, because it is changing your life. It is the end of your world as you know it right that moment. So but
it's not the end of the world.
Exactly. I'm like trying to like make it make sense. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to like get my thoughts out in a way that I'm meaning them.
We are big mental health advocates. And, you know, if there's anything you're struggling with, or like you said, you get diagnoses that scare you, like there's definitely communities, there's help, there's people you can talk to. And I find it. Yay.
Her name is Lauren. Her YouTube channel is just called Living Well with Schizophrenia, actually. She lives with a diagnosis of schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder, and she posts so many educational videos about like her experiences. Obviously, you know, it's just her personal experience. It doesn't apply to every single person. Sure. But, you know, she's talked about times in her life before she was being treated and how that affected her life and relationships. But now she talks a lot more about like just her current like day to day. Like she'll make videos sometimes and it's like, you know, I'm not having a good day today, that kind of thing. And she's just like really open about what's going on, what kind of things she does to like handle it. And she is so amazing. I
love the transparency.
Yes. I was like so proud of her without even knowing who this person is. When I first saw one of her videos pop up, I was like, that is so like brave. And I'm not like, obviously there's the connotations that go with mental health disorders that make it, you know, like seem kind of brave to like talk about it, but also just to talk about anything that personal, whether it's some kind of diagnosis or like a personal relationship or something. Talk about something that personal to help other people on the internet is just like, wow. Yeah. Like, that is so selfless and amazing. And I love it. I love her.
No, and it makes me happy to see stuff like that, because I mean, not that everyone knows, like, you know, I myself, like I have tics and I have really bad OCD. And so to see people who are able to like help others feel more normal, like that is so important, because you do feel like, you know, you're not normal and you feel like you're in this place where you're so different from everyone else. And so it really is just such a big difference seeing somebody who's going through the same thing as you, who can help you, who can give you tips on like ways to make things feel better for yourself. It's just so important.
Exactly, because these illnesses are invisible. We think that they're less common, and they're not. So it's just really important to always keep that in mind. Like, you are not the only person going through the things that you're going through. Like, other people have these same mental health disorders, and it's really important to be open and honest with your healthcare providers and also with your friends and family.
Yes,
So
they can help.
That's our soapbox.
Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled program.
I freaking love the whole, like, they infiltrated the freaking United States of America.
Yes.
Like,
what the hell?
By the way, I'm actually like best friends with the president of the United States.
He's like, yeah, I got the president
together.
elected.
I literally organized that. And that guy, he's actually really dope.
That dude's dumb as fuck.
He is, but he's like a chill guy.
But no, he's not. He's actually the best. That was probably my favorite flashback out of the entire story, is how he met him and like their night together.
Like a genuinely good guy.
Yes, the night that they had together that changed everything.
Mm-hmm. And Tobias was like, this man because Tobias's whole thing in general is like, if you want to see corruption, like, look where the money is. But here was this guy, Preston, who had money, but he wasn't a horrible, like, motherfucker. He had money, but he wasn't a disgusting piece of shit. And Tobias was like, oh, you can have money and not, like, literally just harm other people every day for fun.
Like, you know what? We need you in the big leagues. I'm not going to lie. When I read that chapter the first time, because he was saying how Preston's parents had died and how he basically was on his own, and like he sought solace in Tobias and their friendship, but like how he had just left all of his luggage for him one day. And like after their night out together, I'm like, oh my God, is this dude gonna kill himself? I got so scared because I was like, no, not Preston. But then he was yeah, then he went on to be the president of the United States. I was like, what the fuck?
Oh, it really took a turn for you.
Oh my God, I got so scared.
When I was reading that chapter, I was like, oh my God, is this guy Bruce Wayne? Like, he just
so scared for him and like his like depression.
Yeah. But like, when I read that part, I did immediately take it as he just like wanted Tobias to have things. And so I did not assume.
Immediately jumped to the worst case scenario.
You're like, oh my God, should I panic?
Like, is he okay?
I'm going to just like go ahead and panic, and I can always change my mind later.
You know what was my absolute favorite part of this entire book was Cecilia's mom telling the story of how she took care of the King brothers. So I got so freaking emotional over this. So it starts out, Cecilia's pissed at her mom still because they kind of had a falling out because she felt like she just lied to her, which she had. And we find out she continued lying to her, but it was for a good reason.
But also she didn't know that Cecilia and Tobias were like together too.
True. Because when she saw him, she was like, what the fuck?
She's like, what are the chances?
So as we know, Cecilia's mom was the cause of the fire that killed Tobias and Dominic's parents at Horner Industries. And so she felt so guilty about it. And one day she saw Tobias walking to the drugstore to buy Dominic some medicine because he was sick, and their aunt was a drunk and she was gone all the time. And so basically Tobias had to step in as Dom's dad. Like, that was his parental figure, not Delphine. And so on his way there, she was like, hey, let me offer you a ride. And she's like 9 months pregnant with Cecilia at this time, like heavily pregnant with Cecilia. And Tobias was like, stranger danger, no thank you. And she was like, no, like, if you don't get in here, I will start crying. And she does start crying. And she's like, get in this car.
Which is, you should always get in someone's car if they threaten to start crying. Yes. Like, everyone knows.
And so she takes him to this drugstore, and she knows who he is too. Like, she knows where Delphine lives because Delphine was one of her only friends at the plant until her sister's death. And so she takes Tobias there, and he's like counting change in his head because he's got $5. Like, he has to spend this correctly. And she ends up buying him books and cars and medicine and food and snacks for Dom and like all this stuff. And he's just like, whoa, I can't afford this. And she's like, yeah, don't worry about it. Like, I got it. And like throughout the years, like continues sending them money and sending them stuff like as they get older. And so while Cecilia was growing up, they didn't have any extra money and they kind of lived off the bare minimum. And we find out it's because her mom was sending anything extra she made to the King brothers because of what she took away from them. And it made me so sad for Cecilia and her mother, but also for Dom and Tobias, because it was just a shitty situation, but they never knew who was sending that to them. They never knew like what these donations were.
I think they assumed that it was Roman kind of paying them off to keep them quiet, but it wasn't at all, because she literally, Cecilia's mom did not tell Roman about it at all, because she was like,
they didn't have contact with each other.
That, and also she was like, he'll see it as like we're admitting guilt to like the death of their parents, basically. So yeah, like that was completely her own money, which she did not have a lot of.
And I don't know, that was just my absolute favorite part of the book, seeing that like they saw it as having like a guardian angel of sorts, while Cecilia was living in basic like poverty due to her mother's guilt.
Right.
And so
the boys were also living in poverty too.
Oh yeah, like, Delphine was not a good caretaker.
Yeah. And like those things she was sending them, it was like also the bare minimum. So like, because she was having to split her money basically. So I think that part is like, you know, like it's not like she was taking care of them more than she was taking care of them.
No. She wasn't neglecting Cecilia. She was just doing whatever she could to like kind of appease some of the guilt she felt over the death of their parents.
Right. I just wanted to make that clear in case anyone hadn't read the book.
But it was just, I don't know. It was a very sad, very like open moment that she had between her mom, but also between Tobias and Cecilia's mother. And it kind of felt like, again, coming full circle. So a lot of this in the series was just tying up any loose ends that we had.
Yeah. And I did really love that. Honestly, another one of my favorite things was just that entire scene of Tobias. He had this whole plan for date night. He was going to cook Cecilia a dinner. He had set up these like twinkling lights in the backyard to look like fireflies to remind them of falling in love during that summer they had together. But he gets extremely drunk because he's reading the Thornbirds to understand Cecilia better. And when he reads that, he's like drinking to try to cope with the fact that like she thinks these things about him. Like she thinks that he's a bad guy, basically, based on his interpretation of this book. And so he gets so
rip-roaring drunk,
like blackout drunk. And he's like, Cecilia, this isn't us. Like he's texting her and she's like, okay,
what the fuck?
Yeah, I know it's not us. I'll be home soon and XOXO. So she's like driving home and she sees him running down the sidewalk in his fucking jeans and an apron. She's like, hello? Like,
get in the fucking car.
And so she, like, when she gets in the house, the kitchen is destroyed because he just accidentally makes a horrible mess while he's drunk as fuck.
He's very upset.
He's very upset. And she like tucks him into bed and goes to let the dog out and sees the lights. And she's like, oh, like he's really trying. And so that part was like, it was sweet because you could see that progress on her end, but he didn't know about it.
It was a turning point in the book.
Yes, it was. But it was also hilarious.
But it was the funniest thing I've ever read.
And then like also when he first arrived in town, this is just another like funny Tobias moment. She had a to-do list out like with some, you know, some chores, some things to do. At the end of it, it said like entertain Mr. Handsome. And he was like, the fuck you are entertaining.
Who the hell is that?
And so it turns out it's this patron at her cafe who's like hot and he's like in a suit and shit. And so he's like, absolutely not. She is not to doing this, man. And it was just super funny. It turns out that guy, Cecilia, literally knew
She
he was actually a
knew.
bad guy. She was like, this guy was actually sent here to like keep tabs on me. And I know that, but I'm trying to make Tobias jealous for funsies and also to keep him in the dark about my badass plan to take down these bad men. And she pulls it all off because she's a fucking baddie.
She's a baddie. There were a few things that I also hated about this book. Honestly, I think the first and biggest one, because we've covered some other stuff, you know, the back and forth and how we could have just condensed this to a few chapters. But I think what ground my gears the most was that she named her dog after Tobias's father, who he revered more than anyone else in the world. And I felt like that was just kind of like a slap in the face.
That is kind of disrespectful.
Like, how disrespectful.
But I will say, when she named that dog, she was like trying to find closure in her relationship with Tobias, and she thought that she was never going to be with him.
I know, but like, man, that just sat wrong with me.
I get it. I do. Because it's a dog. So it's like, we're really like, it's one thing to name your child after someone that's extremely important to you, but your dog, it's like
it's like, yeah, you could have named your firstborn child Bo, not your dog.
Yeah. It's like, I get it. I get it. You're right.
Hit me wrong. But other than that, like I said, we kind of talked about everything else we didn't like. We're not going to beat a dead horse because Kate doesn't deserve that.
No, she doesn't, because she did so many good things, and that's what I want to
so many good things for us.
I do want to touch on symbolism because we had something new introduced this book. So we talked about, like, in the first book, and also it carried over into the second and third books, the symbolism of the ravens in the Ravenhood. In this book, Tobias has this, like, basically this shell that's been closed, and inside it are like these little, like, are they made of pearl or just stone? They're little doves, like little pearl doves. And it's like something his father had given to him. And so, like, he's never opened it because it's been like something that he's cherished. And he's like, I need like the right time to open this. Like, it's become something very important to him. So he does open it for Cecilia. There's 5 pearl doves inside. And he tells her they represent her, him, Sean, Dom, and Tyler.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler. And he's like, these are like, they symbolize us now.
It's like the founding fathers of the Ravenhood plus Cecilia.
Exactly, plus Cecilia, because she is like the most important person in his life right now at this point. And so just that transition from ravens to doves is a symbol in itself, because doves are often a symbol of peace, of freedom, and love. And so this is like, they're transitioning from being active in the Ravenhood to retiring and, like, you know, living out their dreams. Basically, now that they've like accomplished everything they set out to do, they are now free to live in their lives and with their loved ones, and just like not have that daily fear of like being in dangerous situations and risking your life for certain things. Like, they're free of that, and like they served their time. Basically, it's kind of like how I imagine it feels for people to retire from like military service. It's kind of like, I'm transitioning now to a period in my life where I have very much earned the right to like live my life in a peaceful and happy way. So It was a very like powerful moment in the book. It's like basically right at the end.
Very good ending to the story.
Yeah. So I thought that symbolism was really cool. Just also because they're both birds. And so they like, you know, Kate kept it in the same like category.
Because the crows like represent like a like a brotherhood and like a never ending like loyalty to each other. Like transition of that. It was very nice. It was a very smooth thing for her to do.
Yeah, she's a good writer. I mean, I think we can just say like,
like she's really good. I'm going to read her other books, Drive and Reverse. Reverse is her newest book coming out, and I'm going to start the new series, and I hope it's amazing. I'm sure it will be, because she's incredible.
It's always like great to wait until the point when like there's already multiple books out in a series, because you're like, I don't have to wait for that.
Yeah,
like,
that's why I started the Ravenhood, because it was already done.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I read unfinished series because I hate myself.
Yeah. So
Gives me something to look forward to.
basically, I just want to feel like my life is worth living. So
It's fine.
just kidding. Just kidding.
But that wraps up the Ravenhood series. So it's really been a pleasure reading it. Like I said, Kate Stewart is awesome, and read her other stuff. But join us next week when we cover another segment of Poetry Corner. We're going to be focusing on Margaret Atwood, who's one of our favorite poets.
Margaret Atwood inspired my love of poetry.
Yes.
She
Thank
is
you,
the
Vicky
OG
Meyer.
for me. Yes. So Tabby and I, we were in a basically an advanced
International.
Yeah, like think of like an honors class basically, but they had like this whole program for it. But it was literature, world literature. And our senior year of high school, we had this wonderful educator, Miss Vicky Meyer. She is fantastic through and through. I wish I could catch up with her because I feel like
she's the reason that we read poetry, that we are like a cultured people.
One of the biggest things that I took away from her is the amount of times that she drove this home, but she would always just say, reading saves lives.
It does.
Like, whether she was joking or being serious, like
reading does save lives, and that's why we are doing what we do today.
She is a wonderful educator, and I hope she's doing well and still thriving. But anyway, Margaret Atwood is one of our favorite poets, and we are so excited to share her poems with you and analyze them with you next week. So we'll see you there. And as always,
let's get lit.